Well, the week started out with some dramatic witnesses, but now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty with some very detailed but very important testimony.
Let's say they take the view that it was unethical. That's not a predicate for a RICO. That's not a predicate for a crime. That is not a crime.
Kwame Kilpatrick's lawyer says the state of Michigan may have had ethical concerns about his wife, Carlita, getting paid with state grant money, but it wasn't against the law. The feds allege that Kilpatrick and co-defendant Bobby Ferguson committed fraud by directing more than $280,000 in state grant money to Carlita Kilpatrick's company called Unite and to Ferguson's nonprofit called Detroit 3D. The former Detroit mayor, his father Bernard Kilpatrick, Ferguson, and former Water Department Director Victor Mercado are all charged with racketeering, accused of running a criminal enterprise out of City Hall. State budget analyst Lisa Shoemaker testified today about the state's concerns with how Detroit 3D spent their grant money back in 2001. Shoemaker told the jury that the state refused to give the second installment of the grant because of a lack of documentation and because they did not understand why Ferguson purchased this building with the money. Defense lawyers fired back, though, getting Shoemaker to admit that some of 3D's documentation wasn't included in the government's exhibits and that Ferguson was creating a training facility inside Ferguson Enterprises for low-income people.
The case is in the cross-examination.
Shoemaker's testimony took the entire day in court, a stark contrast to the witnesses earlier this week that included Detroit police officers, a former state senator, and Malin Clift, a man who considers himself a brother to Kwame Kilpatrick, but claims that he delivered 90 grand in cash to the former mayor. Legal analysts say getting so technical with the witnesses now may be a strategy for the defense.
One option is to try to slow the case down and really make it about little different parts and ultimately argue to the jury saying, we've seen a lot of different pieces, but does it all come together?
So far, the testimony has been only about Kilpatrick and Ferguson, which seems to suit Mercado's legal team.
Well, there's not much to mention about Victor, so that's the way it's going to be.
At the end of week one, Kilpatrick's attorney says as long as the jury is following all of the details unfolding inside the courtroom, his client's presumption of innocence will prevail.
The government doesn't have an advantage. They have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt in a very, very difficult case. We're not going to be rolled over, and we're not going to be taken advantage of, and we're not going to take this laying down.
Testimony about the state grants will continue into next week, and then you can expect to start hearing some more information about those allegations of campaign fund kickbacks. Reporting live at the federal courthouse in downtown Detroit, I'm Heather Catallo, 7 Action News. Carolyn, back to you.
And Heather, of course, you've been following this case day in and day out. You've been watching things in court and seeing how technical things are getting. So how is the jury handling the testimony so far?
For the most part, they are extremely engaged. They're taking notes. Each day they have sort of a witness sheet that they're given, and they're taking notes. Have noticed an occasional eye roll here and there, depending on who's doing the talking. But for the most part, they do seem to be really listening very carefully to the lawyers and the witnesses.